Okay, so here we go. So my name is JT Cronje and I'm the co-founder of Tomorrow Today. We are a proudly South African AI newsletter, and this whole story started almost a year ago. And I'll just quickly hand over to Anton, my other co-founder, to just quickly do a 2-minute introduction and almost just sharing the heart behind what we do and why we do this. I think that's an apt way to start. So Anton, over to you.
Thanks, JT. And yeah, thank you so much to everyone who is joining and who's still joining us. See, there's about 70 people on the call already. And yeah, it's such a blessing. JT and I were just chatting before this now, and we're just super grateful that yeah, this conversation is getting so much traction. And I think it just speaks to the importance of having these types of conversations in today's day and age. And we're super excited to kind of host tonight. And yeah, thanks for your effort and willingness to do this, JT. So as JT mentioned, he's kind of gonna run the whole conversation, but I'm just gonna give a quick intro to Tomorrow Today, the newsletter and the kind of business that we've founded. So we, a year ago, basically met up for lunch, JT and I, and we've known each other since universities have come quite a long way. We met up for lunch at Ernie L's wine farm, and we just kind of had this conversation about AI and kind of where we are heading towards and the things that really excites us. And long story short, I just kind of realized that JT has a wealth of knowledge and just this incredible depth and excitement and enthusiasm about the AI industry and all the kind of advancements that are happening on a weekly basis, and it's growing at such a rapid pace. But at the same time, there's so much information and nothing to really channel that into a compact and easy, no fluff weekly read. And I basically just told him, JT, how can we use your brain and your knowledge and your enthusiasm and just kind of channel that into empowering and equipping our friends, family, our network, and even beyond our own network, just people to actually learn and grow in this exciting time. And how can we do that together in the coolest way possible? And we basically landed on a newsletter, and fast forward about a year later, we're on 43 weekly newsletters. And tonight is our first official live webinar / workshop. And we're super excited, and it's again just such a big blessing that everyone's here. So thank you so much for that. And JT, I'll hand over to you, and you can take it away.
I say, so before we start, we're just quickly going to launch a poll. So just out of interest, and you guys can vote, we just want to gauge, like, where are you currently interacting with AI? Just to almost get an idea. Because I remember the first time ChatGPT was released, I was like, yo, this is crazy. And a lot of people have gotten stuck at ChatGPT, and we still think AI is something that lives in a browser. But almost a year ago, I switched to Claude, and now all of a sudden, Claude is all the rage in the media. And it's cool to see that a lot of people are actually already on Claude. And from a model perspective, there's basically nothing that distinguishes Claude's models from ChatGPT's models from Gemini's models. But what makes Claude super powerful is it's actually something that can do stuff if you give it hands. And the purpose of tonight is to teach you how to start thinking about AI not as something that answers a question, but as something that can actually do something for you and can add value to your work and your business ultimately and make you more productive. So there's guys of you at varying levels of AI adoption. This is to take you from 0 to 1. There's multiple use cases. This is not completely exhaustive, but it's meant to be an interactive way for you to learn and see what AI and Claude can actually do. So without further ado, just brief house rules. Most of you are already behaving. So it's basically just camera mic off. We don't want to disturb people. And please, I'm not a university lecturer. I get tired of my own voice. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. We want this to be interactive, and we want this to be super fun and informative at the end of the day. My whole dream for the AI age is that we go from consumer to creator, because the social media age turned us into consumers, but this can almost pull us out of this. So that's what my hope and my dream is for every one of you. So just quickly, what is Claude? So there's about 3 or 4 big AI companies, at least in the West. It is OpenAI, which has ChatGPT, Google, which is Gemini, XAI, which has Grok, and then there's Anthropic, which has Claude. So Anthropic prides themselves for being a safety first company, and they released an app called Claude Desktop a few months ago, which essentially is something that it's an app that lives on your computer. So just to quickly show you, this is Claude Desktop. It's something that you open, it's not a link, it lives on your computer, and it can actually do stuff for you. You can ask it to create an Excel sheet, to sort through invoices, to write a Word document, to go through different folders. It has hands. And it's actually the fastest growing AI platform at the moment. And just to quickly also give you a bit of context about the Claude landscape, Anthropic has 3 models. Number 1 is Haiku. It's a super fast, super quick model, but not always the smartest. It's almost like the wing in the rugby team of your school. It's super fast, nimble, but not always the smartest guy. Then you have Sonnet 4.6. It's the middle model. It's a workhorse. It is good at everything it does, and it's good enough for 95% of the use cases. And then you have Opus 4.6. This is your super strong, super smart model, but it's also more expensive. So something that people will need to start shift their thinking about is we think of AI as a monthly subscription. We pay $20 a month to Claude or ChatGPT, but actually what it is a token cost. So these guys price it per million tokens, and that's how they measure how much more expensive it is. So 1 prompt of Opus costs more than 1 prompt of Sonnet. And that's all that you have to know for now. So Claude is no different than ChatGPT. You have Claude Chat. So you can go onto the internet, in your URL bar, you can go claude.ai, which is exactly the same as chatgpt.com, and you can ask it questions, and it won't be that much different of an experience. It won't make you a more productive individual. You will ask a question and you will get an answer. It's an AI that most of us is used to. But then you actually get to what Anthropic made, which is a massive, massive productivity gain, which is Claude Cowork. It is basically your assistant. Think of it as your PA. You ask it to do something and it actually goes and does it. It has hands to create. Luckily, it doesn't have feet yet, so it can't walk and do stuff, but it has hands on your computer. So now all of a sudden, it moves from a conversation to a co-working employee, which changes everything, what is possible. So the whole idea of tonight is to, by using a practical example, just show you some of what's possible. This is by no way exhaustive, but it's the start. The thing with AI is we can have so much head knowledge about what is possible, but if we don't actually start playing and learning how to use this stuff, then we won't actually get the value from it. So what we've decided to do is we've decided to create a fictitious company called Claude Clothing. Recently, everybody was diving for crayfish, so that's why the claw bit is in it. And it's a clothing company, and we just want to show you some examples about how we can use Claude Cowork within this fictitious company to help us do stuff. And almost something that I want you to keep in your mind whenever you're working is, before you start with a task, ask almost, can AI do this? The answer is probably yes. Then you should go and ask it, and then it will tell you. But there's so much learning that we have to do, and also so much unlearning that we have to do in this AI age to actually learn how to use these tools to its full potential. So the first thing that's very important with this is, once you give an agent access to your computer, it can do amazing stuff for you, but it can also make lots of damage. So just as it has the power to create stuff, it can also delete stuff, and it can move stuff to places where you don't know it is, and it can change stuff without you knowing it changed it. So you should always keep that in mind. Like exactly how you would treat a junior employee is how you should treat this thing. You should send it a separate file, give it a separate workspace or a separate folder where it can do the stuff where if it goes haywire, there's no danger. So that's the first thing that I just want you guys to realize, that this is technology with hands. It's not perfect. It's still growing and learning. It's very good already, but there's a safe way to do this. So whenever you do a task with Claude Code or Claude, it's very important to create a separate folder where you copy all of the files in that you want to use, and then you go from there. We recommend this folder structure, and we'll send you a guide afterwards on how to create it. But essentially, you create 4 folders. One has context in it about your business and about you and how you want to do things. The other thing is a projects folder, which is all of the projects, the active work that you're doing can be in there. The outputs is where it will write stuff so that it's just sandbox. And examples is if you have an example of how a spreadsheet should look like or how a report should look like, you will put it in there, and then the AI will know, okay, this is how it should look like. Let's use that example, alter that, and then you will have something that's on brand in the correct format that you want, etc. So this is just a workspace setup that we suggest. There's no right or wrong way. The principle should just always be that you give it its own separate environment to work in your computer, so that it don't accidentally delete a lot of stuff. In that folder, and again, this is not needed, it will just increase the accuracy of your output. We recommend creating 3 files: about you file, your brand voice or how you write, because it's clearly obvious if I wrote something, and also your working preferences, like, do you like your spreadsheets to look in a certain way? Do you like to name your files a certain way, etc.? Then it can actually do things like you want it to be done. And again, we live in the age of AI, so you don't have to do this. You can ask AI to do it. So we'll also send you the slides afterwards. So when I get started with something new, what I would do is I would use a prompt like this. I would copy it in Claude Code or in Claude Code. I gave it access to the correct folder here, and then I would paste it in here. And then I would ask AI to interview me so that it knows who I am and how I want to do certain stuff. So I'll just go through the first 1 or 2 questions with you guys so you can almost see how it works. I've rerun a lot of stuff here because it's not always instantaneous, because it's actually something that does something. It takes a bit longer. So yeah, it asked me a question. So it says, you've mentioned you're a co-founder of Claude Clothing. What's your role specifically, and who's the other co-founder? So my role is specifically related to operations and finance. My other co-founder is Anton, and he is the creative lead on the project and the designer. So then we would go, and then it will keep on asking you questions, and then it will ultimately go and create those 3 files for you. And then there's 1 or 2 follow-up questions. We can say, we are only an online business and we buy our stock from China, and our typical customer is an individual between 18 and 35 in Cape Town. And then this will continue going on and on and on until it has enough information. And then I can just tell it to go and create the files, and then it will go and update those files. So then I'll just say, okay, my working preferences is I prefer using CSVs instead of Excel docs. I want to always use sentence case, and I want to be brief in the way that I do stuff. I don't like verbose wording. Please create the 30 files that I ask you to create. And then once I'm tired of its questions, I will just go and tell it to do that. And then it will ultimately go and create the files. And now we are set up and ready. We have our safe folder structure. Our AI knows about us, what we do, how we want to do things. And now we can actually start using this to do certain stuff in our business. Another thing, and again, this is not needed, it's just if you really want to use this as a productivity tool, I would recommend you go and do this. There's certain global instructions that you can set to prevent it from deleting stuff. So if you go into settings, into Cowork, there's a section called global instructions where you can basically also say, this is who I am, always ask for approval, this is the voice and tone you should use, and never delete stuff is something pretty important to put in there. And then you are a little bit safer. Sometimes it still does stupid stuff, but this will protect you against 99% of that. Then another thing that makes Claude unique is one, it can do stuff on your computer, but two, it can also do stuff in other work apps that you have. So for instance, if you use Gmail, it can actually go and draft an email in your Gmail account. If you use Notion, it can actually go and draft something in your Notion. If you use Slack, it can actually go and send a message on Slack and read what's going on there. If you use Google Drive, it can actually go and read what's on your Google Drive. If you use OneDrive, it can actually go and create files on your OneDrive, read files from your OneDrive, etc. There is a myriad of connections. So if you go here, manage connectors, go up here, this is all of the connectors that there is in Claude. So there's a very good chance that whatever you are using, you can connect to this. And now all of a sudden, Claude has access to go and do something on that app. It's like your intern going and doing something on Figma and creating it on Figma, or creating a document on DocuSign. So there's a lot of connectors that's pre-built that you can easily connect to. So I would recommend everyone getting started to connect your Gmail, your Google Drive, and some basic connectors. But it's very important. It also just levels up your experience with Claude. And if by odd chance it isn't connected, you can use something like Zapier, but we won't go into that. That's maybe a next follow-up session for you. But now all of a sudden, your Claude agent has access to all of your working apps. So the first demo that we want to show is, in a company, there's lots of invoices. And what I want you to think here is it's unstructured data in PDFs that's named inconsistently that we need to capture. So you can go and think of, in your day-to-day, where do you have files that you have to get information from, summarize it, and write it in a structured format. So to give you an idea, we received, for instance, let me go in here. We've received lots of invoices, and we now want to ask Claude to sort through these invoices and then ultimately go and summarize it per supplier, extract the invoice amounts, and then actually go and create a spreadsheet of that, summarizing it for us. So now all you need to do is create a simple prompt like this that will tell you to go through all of the files in this subfolder. I'll show you how the subfolder looks like now. New task. Go through all of the files in this subfolder, sort it into subfolders, extract key data from each invoice, like the supplier, the date, the amount, and the category, and then create the Excel summary sheet that summarizes this information. So once you say yes to this, then you will almost also see how the agent starts to think. So it's very nice. And at the beginning, I would almost like encourage you to look what it does, because it also gives you an understanding of what it's doing. And essentially what this is doing is it's almost writing scripts or code on your computer to go and do something. So now once it has an understanding and see there's 20 invoice PDFs, it will read through its skills, its knowledge, etc., what to do. Then it will go and create this plan. Yes, Jack.
Hi there, appreciate this so far. Just a quick question. I see that you, when you executed this task, you just went new task. I know that projects are possible within Cowork. Does Cowork have context across different conversations that that aren't grouped in a project? I'm assuming in an ideal situation, we will group different tasks within a project so that it maintains memory and context within that project.
Yes, yes. So once you start, you can almost use skills, and you can also add certain projects to a task at the beginning. So you can link a project that you have to that task. And for those of you who don't know, projects is just a way where you can almost teach AI how to do a certain task very well. If that, you can, for instance, create a project that helps you to do analysis based off sales data. And then you will tell it, this is what you do. You go through this step, you go check this, get it from here, do that, etc. You can add instructions to that and files so that it has context about what to do. So yes, you can link projects to cowork, but in most cases, I would actually use skills, but I'll touch on that a little bit later about what the skill is and what it can actually do. Because then all of a sudden you are not limited to a project.
Cool, thanks, I appreciate it.
So yeah, you guys can actually see what it's doing. It's going through everything. And I'll just actually quickly want to show you guys how this inputs look like. So invoices, it's just a folder with raw invoices that I gave this thing access to. The invoice can look like this. I'll just quickly move this over. It's a basic invoice with different items on it. And the AI will then loop through all of these invoices. It knows what we actually need to extract. And then at the end of the day, as we told it, it should go into outputs, and then it should create the summary for us. So it will be done in about 2 minutes. This is just something that I pre-ran. So here you can see it went through all of the invoices, it lists the supplier, it lists the invoice number, the invoice date, and the amount. And sometimes finance teams can get a bit confused and there can be duplicate invoices. It's smart enough to detect that this invoice is a duplicate of another invoice. And then we'll highlight it in red. There can be missing dates or missing item descriptions. So now all of a sudden, you have a first draft that you can very easily go and review. This would have taken somebody probably an hour to go through all of these invoices to log this. And yeah, it was done in a few minutes without you actually having to lift a finger. And yeah, it will run the command that now ultimately builds the Excel sheet for this live example that we used. So yeah, that was the first thing we wanted to show you. The second thing is it also has reasoning capabilities. And what I mean with reasoning capabilities is it thinks, or at least it mimics thinking. Like if I ask it to build a sales report, it knows that, okay, this is what the user wants. So for me to do this, I need to do X, Y, Z to ultimately get to something. And this is ultimately the end user. So this is almost how I should think of it. I should put myself in the shoes of the analyst when I do this. So something else that I realized through using AI is it's decent in creating Excels and it's decent in creating PowerPoints. But ultimately, a PowerPoint is just, PowerPoint was created for humans to be able to do something. So it's actually what I would call a very dumb interface that was made for humans. AI loves coding and AI loves text. So if you go on a website, you would call it HTML. So that's almost the base language in which every design is made. And it is very good at creating very nice HTML slides. Like for instance, this slideshow you're seeing is not a slideshow, it's HTML code that you can open in your browser and it looks a lot better. So if you, for instance, want to create a report based on your sales data or any type of slideshow, I would always recommend using HTML. But in this example, there is some monthly revenue data that we pulled from our online store. I'll show you how that now looks like. And I want my agent to make me an end of quarter sales report. It should look very nice. It should tell me what my top performing regions are, my top performing products. It should use my brand colors. and it should have an executive view. So it's a full-on brief that you would give to someone that will probably take them a day or two to go and do it. So now we can go back to co-work. I don't want to go on in this chat because it will use up my context window. Context window is essentially whenever I ask AI a question in this chat, it will remember everything that was done beforehand, and it will almost cost you a bit more per question as well. So another good principle is whenever you start a new task, start a new session so that you don't confuse your AI. Because at the end of the day, AI is a probability model. A LLM at its core, a LLM is large language model. ChatGPT is a large language model. Claude is a large language model. It's just maths. It's linear algebra. And my best example to explain how it works is if I ask you to complete the sentence, the boy kicked then you will say ball. So that's how AI works at the fundamental level. It just predicts the most likely next word. So if you have stuff in its context window, like in its history, that isn't related to the task that you're doing now, it will mess up the probabilities, and the chance of your AI hallucinating might get more. That's why it's always best to start a new chat for a new almost task. So here we will ask it to now go and analyze my sales data in this folder and create me a report showing the trends. It should also create me a forecast, and it should write me the executive summary. So just to quickly show you guys how the data that it works with looks like is, if you go to projects, sales, it's a raw CSV file or raw Excel file that just shows this is the product, this is the sales channel, this is where it happened, this is how many was sold, at what price, and whether I created a discount, and the date at which this happened. So it's a raw extract, and you can think of your business. How many cases do you have a raw extract of sales or of inventory or of certain incidents that's happening? And it's always very difficult to analyze this and to create a very good report. So just to quickly go back, here again, I'm not going to show you because this will take, it's a task that will take up to 5 minutes. It's not instantaneous because it has to go through all of these steps and actually learn what's going on. It reasons through everything. It creates the model that ultimately predicts the sales, and then it will actually go and write your report. So to show you the report that this will create, I also pre-ran it just so that you guys don't have to stare at a blank screen all the time. This is how the report looks like that it generated. It's clean, it looks pretty, it gives you all of the top almost performing items, the headline items that every single executive wants to see. It has the executive summary because executives don't have a chance to read through a lot of stuff. It tells you what product grew the most, what sales channel is dominant. It shows you this graph over time, and it also shows you a prediction based on past 3 months. See, there's a linear forecast, and it breaks down your sales per channel and shows you what units you sold, etc. This is something that is quite impressive, quite useful for lots of use cases. And again, this is something that was done within minutes. Okay, Lawrence first, then Jacques, then John.
Like a Jades, I like it. I like it. My question is, I don't know if you're going to get there in your presentation. I don't know what's lying ahead, but what I've been doing a lot is making interactive slideshows with React. I don't know if that's something you're going to touch later, but maybe, yeah, I just find it quite interesting doing that. And obviously data is a big thing, and, you know, hosting it somewhere. Yeah, maybe if you can touch on that, that's yeah, big interesting topic.
Yeah, so the nice thing, and thanks for that question, Lawrence, you can even make it interactive in HTML. So for instance, if I want to, for instance, see all of the sales that was related to this, I can ask it, okay, if I click on this, I want to see this as well, because it has the base data, and then it will format it. I think it's very important to pick the right gun for the right war. For something like a report, I would go HTML because it's a lighter, almost coding language than React. But if you want to go and build a dashboard, don't do it in HTML, do it in React. And that's where I think for most people, the starting point is something like this. Later on, as you grow and learn what these tools can do, then I would say for someone that's comfortable to, okay, now you can level up to this. But this is more than good enough for 90% of use cases I've experienced. Chalk?
Yes, JT, thanks for hosting this. I think it's very cool, and this report looks very cool. I have two questions. The first one is are these HTML files shareable? And my second question is, do you recommend creating Excel files or CSV, or when would you choose the other?
So HTML files is actually one of the easiest things to share. So this is an HTML file. If it's literally just code. If I email this to you, all that you have to do is download it, and if you double click on it, it will open up in your browser, because HTML is the language that most browsers interpret. So it's very easy to share. If you want, it's the only drawback of it is it's not collaborative in the way that I can make a comment, or you can review it and say, please change this, or easily type it in a way where it's easy to work with. With something like that, Google Docs and Word is still king. But the other thing that's I found very nice, so for instance, if I just quickly go back here to my slideshow, this is a link. So I'll also share this later. There's a thing called Netlify Drop, which is essentially a hosting company where you can very quickly just say like, okay, I want to put this in there. I want to put the password on it. And then this is live. So for instance, if I copy this link now and paste it in the chat, all of you can see my slides. So, but I'm not going to do that because it's going to spoil some of the surprises. So that in short is what it is. So yeah, all of a sudden you'll see it finished opening. If I click on Google Chrome, it should look the same. I'll just quickly throw this over to my different screen just so that you can see that I'm not lying to you. So this was the report that I generated prior to the meeting, and this is the report that our agent generated now. It looks a lot of the same, a little bit different, but it's essentially exactly the same thing. So yeah, that is use case number 2. Is essentially taking data, analyzing it, and writing a report. You can also ask it to write this report in Word, and it will be able to do it if you don't want to do HTML. Yes, John?
Thanks, JT. Just quickly, if you want a consistent report quarter on quarter, would you have to go the route of saving that code that it initially wrote somewhere and then rerunning the prompt every quarter? How do you do that?
That is a brilliant question, and it is something that I actually figured out how to do. So, but that's also, this session is currently geared towards just getting started. So for instance, let's say for instance, I have a proposal template that I have in my business. I don't want to guess how my proposal template is going to look like every time I ask my agent to build my proposal. So that's where Anthropic or Claude released something very smart that they call a skill. So every time, for instance, that I create a proposal, I ask it to use my proposal skill. And in this proposal skill, I gave it exactly the template of how it needs to look like. I tell it, this is the language you use. This is the structure you use. This is who I am. This is the stuff that you don't do. And this is the format that it needs to be in. And it took me about an hour to get it right. because I also learned how to use it. But now I can create a proposal in 2 minutes that is tailored, that always looks the same and follows exactly the same structure in terms of almost an introduction about us, explaining the problem, the pricing, etc. So there is ways to do it. Something that people also have to realize with AI is not perfect out of the box. And that's why it's just important to start playing and not to give up, and then to actually venture into skills as your next step once you've almost gotten familiar with the training wheels of just actually creating the stuff.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Is Colin?
Hey JT, thanks. So one question I just had: how difficult is it to, for example, edit like one of your graphs? If you, like, it looked like the legend, for example, was a bit small, to say to change that. Is it very receptive to something like that, or does it depend?
It is so easy. Because it is text. Like, AI is very good at identifying text, and HTML at its core is text. So I'm actually just giving you now a little bit of explanation. If I ask it to increase the size of this word, or increase the color of change the color of this, or change this sentence to that, because it can very easily identify it, it's very quick to do it, and super easy. So I've actually found it quicker and easier than editing and changing graphs in Excel.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks, JT.
John, I assume that's an old hand.
Sorry, yes, I just saw it.
Okay, so we're going to quickly move on to the third example. And this one is a little bit more niche, but it's also one of Anthropic's, let's call it, party tricks. And when they released this feature, it actually caused billions to be wiped off the New York Stock Exchange. And there's a company called LexisNexis, which is one of the biggest legal tech companies. And I think their share price dropped in 10% in one day after they've released this feature. So it's really something powerful. And that's also why I want to demonstrate this feature, because it's something that's unique to Claude. And it's something that they call plugins. So I'll just quickly show you guys what a plugin is. So a plugin essentially is a skill. And the easiest way to understand the skill is what most companies would have is a SOP, so it's a standard of practice. And it's essentially a document that you set up for your employees to say, like, if we do month-end invoicing, this is the steps that you follow. And that's exactly what the skill is. It tells your AI agent to, if you review a contract, for instance, in this case, look for this, look for this, look for this, consider the environment that you're in, consider laws, etc. So they essentially taught Claude through this plugin to think like a lawyer, or a contract review lawyer, or NDA review lawyer. So if you go in here, you'll see something called plugins. You can add plugins. So there's plugins for multiple almost use cases within Claude. So there's a marketing plugin that can help you draft a blog post for SEO, set up a campaign. There is for engineering certain skills for very specific niche use cases. You don't want to just ask it, generate me a blog post or review this contract. It will do it, but it will miss a lot of stuff. But if you use this plugin, because it actually then knows what to do, your output and your quality will be a lot higher. So for instance, I just want to quickly show you the legal plugin, because I think it's something that can help a lot of small businesses, because legal advice can be quite expensive. And sometimes you just need to know whether you need to refer something to a lawyer. I'm not saying replace your lawyer, that can be risky, but it can almost help you to understand what's going on, and if something warrants you to actually get a legal opinion on something. So this is some of the skills that it has. It can help you review a contract, it can help you prep for a meeting, it can help you set up an NDA or check existing agreements. So there's really a lot that it can do. So in this example, we have a Claude Clothing now has a new supplier and they send us a license agreement, and we're not very sure whether this license agreement is kosher. So I can now copy a very basic prompt like this, and using the legal plugin, so I would go something like, you would go legal, and then you would type in review contract. So you would, the forward slash is almost how you call the skill. You say review contract, you say use the skill, go to this contract, which I'll show you now, identify clauses that are one-sided, unfair or unusual, and flag anything that can put us in risk. Produce this as a summary and write it to a different folder. So this is where you'll now actually see Claude knowing that it should actually go and call the legal skill and almost think like a lawyer. So there it loads its tools, then it will call the skill and update the to-do list. So while this is running, I'll just quickly show you that this takes a PDF, reads it, and actually goes and generates something. Let me just quickly close this. Projects, legal. So this is how the supplier agreement looked like that we got. It looks like a standard legal document, very boring, lots of clauses. And it will now go and read through every clause of this and assess it against the questions that I asked. Here you will see read the file, found the files, it's thinking. You can see the steps like it's thinking, etc. You will see they identified this very one-sided contract, problematic agreement, and now it will read the skill, and now it will actually go and draft it, and it will also tell you what clauses in this contract is you should actually flag for review. So it will then ultimately go and it will write, that's the one that it created for me. No, it's not this. Contract review. I just ask it to write a text file for me here, so I'm just quickly waiting for this to open. But it's essentially drafted something like this. Again, you can ask it to draft the PDF, but it will tell you exactly what the risks are that you have. In this chat, you can ask it certain questions, but it will essentially identify all of the, let's now say, potentially dangerous clauses for your business. Also why it's wrong and what you should ask them to do. So this can help you, like if you're a small business just starting out, it can really prevent you from going into very one-sided contracts that can ultimately cost you a lot of money and headaches one day. So yeah, this is the skills. And just quickly to maybe touch on skills. We will do a follow-up webinar specifically on skills because I think it's one of the biggest almost productivity unlocks. Like John answered, like I want to do, like in a business, there's lots of things that you do multiple times. And whenever something is done multiple times, that should almost make a bell ring in your head and say like, okay, I want to turn this into a skill. And the nice thing about Entropic is they created a skill creator skill. So if I would ask Entropic, please help me create this skill, then it will ask you a lot of questions. You can tell it, you can say this is how it needs to look like, etc. And then it will actually go and create that skill for you. And then whenever, for instance, if I want to create a proposal, I can just call that skill and then it will actually go and create my proposal in exactly the format that I wanted 10 out of 10 times. But that's something that will take a few minutes to explain. So we're not going to dive into that just now. So yeah, whilst this is building, I actually just want to give you guys the chance for questions specifically on plugins as well. Yes, Job.
Yes, JT. So I have a question. You now touched on the skill, but I'm still not grasping the whole skill versus plugin concept. Is a plugin like multiple skills in one thing or what?
So the best way that I would explain it is a plugin is a road that connects you from one town to another. Like for instance, it gives Claude the ability to travel to that town. Like it now can go into your Gmail and read your emails. It can create the email draft. A skill would be something that says, okay, when you draft this email, I want you to do it in this way. So it's almost it's instructions that can be reused. And I wonder whether it would actually help you to understand if I show you how a skill looks like. It's just a guide. It's a guide that tells it, for instance, my business is called People Radar. And whenever I create a document, whether I create a PowerPoint or an HTML thing, I wanted to always use the same font, use the same colors. It needs to look in a certain way. So this will just tell it, this is the primary colors to use. So it's just something that's a very basic, almost you can think of a prompt that you put into it. That's just the base, the starting point of it. Then you can actually go and customize it, and you can actually put pictures in a skill as well. So it will reuse certain pictures. So there's multiple ways that skills can work. So skills, best way to understand it is the connector is the road, and the skill is the map that tells you how to use that road and to drive at a certain pace. Lawrence.
Okay. So my biggest problem that I've been experiencing, and this is quite daunting for me, is, obviously this AI starts diving into the developer world. So suddenly someone that's not coming from a developer background, you're like seeing GitHub repos, you're seeing the skills, you don't know where the conversations are stored, you don't know where the skill file is stored. I mean, here you can see it's natively stored within the Cowork app. But, on your computer, where does that lie? And I think also when you start with the context, which is fantastic, and you can see there's subfolder structures. But as you can see, you've got so many different file structures. You've got Obsidian, you've got all these different things. I know we spoke about that. But what helped you, maybe just as a practical question, just to get your house in order in terms of your file structures? Because if it's clean, you can do a lot of projects, but the projects need to be compartmentalized or partitioned. But also there must be cross-referencing, etc., etc. I hope it makes sense what I'm asking, because it's quite a daunting task sometimes looking at all these files everywhere.
Yeah, I think there's no right or wrong answer for this. I've made millions of mistakes to get to the point where I am, and it's the same with anything that you learn in your life. If you want to become a good batsman or good cricket player, like, you're going to have to face the fast balls, you're going to get hit on the thigh, you'll get a few blow collar, but the most important thing is time in the nets. Like, you actually need to face balls if you want to become a better batsman. And it's the same with AI. Like, you need to start using with this stuff and playing with it. Sometimes it's going to be great. Sometimes it's going to frustrate you and you would want to throw your computer until you learn how to actually use it. But learning comes in the doing. This is an evolving technology. I would equate it to the first time somebody used the word editor. Like, people didn't know how to format stuff then, or that there's a best way how headings should look like. But the most important thing is just actually to start to play with it, because very soon you will realize, oh, this worked very well and this didn't work very well. It's part of why we also want to do webinars like this, to actually show you different ways to maybe go through this, so that you don't have to go through the pain that I maybe went through. So for instance, the next webinar will probably be a more niche webinar focused on creating a skill. But the only way of learning is actually doing. And there's certain principles to follow, like, if it's easy for a human to understand, it's easy for an AI to understand, and it prefers text over complex documents. And then you just go from there. See you, Pierre.
Yes, JT. Sorry, this is maybe a bit off topic. But for someone who works with other client data, right? So let's say, for instance, in my case, how can I be sure that by using this AI and Claude, that the client's data is protected and it's not going to be leaked outside or shared with someone else? Yeah, that's just something that I'm wondering about.
That's a very, very, very good question, because a lot of companies work with confidential data, and not all of the data that you uploaded is going to be stored somewhere and trained with. So, but there is a risk of leakage. Like, you don't want, if you work in an audit firm, you don't want to upload the entire Fs that hasn't been signed off, and must still be published into AI. Like, it won't necessarily leak to other people, but people at Anthropic or ChatGPT will get access to it. So you don't want to do that. And that's why where all of the major AI companies, like for instance, a Claude, ChatGPT, they have something that they call enterprise subscriptions. So enterprise subscription is essentially Claude and Claude Desktop and everything, but the data remains ring-fenced within that enterprise's environment. And that's where companies will need to start waking up. Like, if you're a mid to a large size company, like, your people are using this stuff, they're probably paying the $20 on their own just because they realize how much more productive it makes it. Isn't it actually time to invest that money in getting that enterprise license to ensure that, I know they're uploading stuff, they're probably uploading stuff that they shouldn't upload, but then they can at least upload it in a safe and sandbox environment. So it's a larger change that organizations will need to make at the executive level, but that's the only way to ensure that whatever you give this thing access to doesn't leak into the public domain. Jack?
JT, I appreciate it. Yeah, just piggybacking off that question, I would agree. The enterprise plan is what we spend a lot of time covering so that we can have that data contained. Otherwise, for example, even now with certain things, we don't have certain skills and plugins available just because they're still figuring how that works in the AI policy scheme of things. And so what I do in that case is I just to play around with it on my own. You want to use these tools and use Zapier, for instance, so just have a personal account on the side where I play.
Yeah.
But another security related question, do you think that there's, and there probably is, do you think that there's security risk in taking these self-contained and local HTML files that we created, and I love that tip, the HTML over PowerPoint, and then dropping them in something like Netlify, especially if those dashboards and those reports are containing sensitive invoicing or client-specific data? And given that there probably is that security risk, how can we deploy that in a safer environment?
Yeah, brilliant question. And I would flip that question on its head as well and say, like, okay, I've created all of these Word documents. What's preventing my people from actually just sending that out? I would argue that sometimes something that's deployed is safer. So for instance, if you deploy it, you can very easily on Netlify tell it to add a password. So then it's almost like encrypted PDF. It's exactly the same. So that's if you deploy it. Otherwise, it's probably safer just to, if you email an HTML file to someone, they just download it, then it works exactly the same as a report. If you upload it to your OneDrive, it's exactly the same. But with all of this stuff, the thing that frightens me the most is security, because a lot of people are doing things and they don't necessarily know how to secure it. So I would just say, like, follow the same principles that you follow when you use a Word doc or a PowerPoint. Like, save it in a secure location, make sure you have access managed. If you send it to someone, probably good. If it's very sensitive data, to include a password, then it's exactly the same in this case.
Cool, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I know we are running out of time, so I'll just quickly mention two other neat features that Claude has. Number one is scheduled tasks. So if, for instance, you go there and you say scheduled, let's say, for instance, you want a summary of all of the events in your calendar for the day and who you're meeting with and a background of that. Then you can create a scheduled task telling Claude to every morning at 7:30 a.m. do this, create the email, send it to me so that I know exactly how my day is looking like, etc. Dispatch is another cool almost feature. So maybe one day you've been driving, you're like, oh shucks, I forgot to email this to somebody, but the file is stuck on your computer. Then you can use dispatch, and then it actually links to your via your phone to your computer, and then it actually allows Claude to do something on a computer. So if you go to dispatch on your phone's Claude app, then you can say, please go to this folder, get this, tell me actually what's standing in there. Then your computer will physically go whilst you're not there, if it's turned on, open that Excel file and tell you what's going on there and send you a message. It's a very early feature. It's sometimes a bit buggy, but it's quite cool. It's like you can send a voice note on your phone and something happens on your computer, even though you're 200 kilometers away. So that's a very neat feature that Claude also has. Something else that Claude has, but we'll also do a separate session on this. We deliberately decided to use Claude Code because it's the most user-friendly way of interacting with agents, but it's Claude Code. And it's a super powerful tool that developers and technical teams can use to automate and do a lot of work at a pace that's honestly frightening. And yeah, we want to leave you with practical next steps. So after this, we'll send all of you guys that attended an email that contains the recording, also contains that folder structure that I almost showed. It contains the slideshow and everything that you actually need to get started. And then I just want to challenge you, like, go and play with this. Like, ultimately, if knowledge doesn't go into action, then it's worthless. Knowledge is valuable when applied, and it's the same with AI. And then just start playing with this and start playing with it in low risk environments. Like, don't necessarily go and feed it all of your confidential data at once. Like, start playing around this. Like, okay, I want to build a small report based on this data. You can even ask it to generate dummy data or draft this email for me in my Gmail. Like, just start playing with it and getting a feel. Like, once you start getting a feel and start getting comfortable, then you can progress. A lot of times we as humans, we want to go from this to this without taking the steps that we actually need to take. And it's no different with AI. And then, Jack, you briefly touched on it where you mentioned skills. And that's a major risk for organizations. So because skills is just instructions, you can actually go and download a lot of skills from the internet as well. For specific reasons, I will share that in a later session. But if you download a skill, you don't know who created that skill. And because that skill teaches the AI what to do, that skill, somebody can actually embed an instruction in that skill that's quite dangerous. And say, for instance, go into this folder and share everything, or look for this and do this, or try and find this person's bank details or whatever. Like, you can embed malicious instructions in that skills. And something that's very easy to do just to check is look for skills that a lot of people are using. I'll show that in a later one as well. And then before installing the skill, just ask Claude, is there anything harmful in this skill? And it will read through and it should be able to pick it up 8 out of 10 times. But again, apply general wisdom as with anything in life. And then other tools that I find super useful. Number one is Whisperflow. I don't know if you guys saw, but when I speak with Claude, I don't type. So I would say, on average, you can type 40 words a minute. Most people speak at 150 words a minute. So the easiest way to 3x your output is to use a dictation tool like Whisperflow instead of typing. And then it will type it in. So it's one of the tools that absolutely revolutionized the way that I work, because with AI, the most important thing is context, and the more context and the more words and the more background you give it, the better. But we as people are lazy and we don't want to spend 10 minutes typing a prompt. But I can very easily speak for a minute and give all of that 10-minute information in that minute. And a tool like Whisperflow just helps you to do that. Another tool is Granola. There's a lot of AI meeting recorders, but not all of them work in in-person meetings. Granola is something that also works very nicely in in-person meetings. Google Stitch is another design tool that can help you concept and design websites very fast. 11 Labs is if you ever want to generate a voiceover for something, you can use that. And Lovable is for easy prototyping of basic and internal apps. Again, I would use, like anyone can use it, but if you want to build something that's actually used in your organization, I would ask someone with some technical knowledge just to make sure that it is safe and not hackable and that it has the proper authorization on it. But yeah, that is Flight on Stories 8. We hope that you enjoyed this. And yeah, if there's any other questions, feel free to ask. We'll stay on for a few more minutes. And yeah, we just hope that you learned something and that this can help you take the next step into actually starting to use AI. I think Megan's hand went up first, if I'm not mistaken, if that hand is still up.
Hi, JT. Sorry, that was a mistake.
Okay, Colin, I don't know if your hand was a mistake.
No, it was not. Thanks. So one thing I was just wondering, well, yeah, I'm just thinking about how I can apply it to my work, just my life in general, I guess, yeah, let's say work specifically. One thing, and so for context, I work as a, let's say, mechanic